and welcome to Boarding All Captains, the CNU Study Abroad Office's official podcast. On this week's episode, I have David, the coordinator of finance for the Study Abroad Office. David, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Well, to kind of get started, will you tell us a little bit about how you got into the field of study abroad?
Yeah, definitely. So I was a study abroad student myself when I was in my undergrad, but I've always been interested in international topics and international affairs and going abroad. I started by studying French when I was in middle school, and I became obsessed with it, learning the language, the culture, etc. And then I was fortunate enough in high school to have the opportunity to live with a French family. They were family friends, but I moved back to France with them when they left the United States, and I got to live in a castle.
That's so cool. And correct me if I'm wrong, you speak a few more languages than just French, right?
I do. Je peux parler français. Et aussi nihongo mo hanaseru. So I speak French and Japanese.
Very cool. Yeah. I know that was something that was so interesting that we talked about recently as you were joining our office in the interview. I don't know. So going off of your degrees with learning French and Japanese, where did you go to college?
So I was a transfer student. I went to a junior college before I transferred to finish my undergrad. I was at Richard Bland, and then I transferred to William & Mary and finished my degree there. And during my time, I was able to study abroad. So I did take a little longer to finish my degree, and so I'm not gonna say that it wasn't a very specific choice that I made, and it may not be for everyone, but it is certainly possible if you're a transfer student to study abroad.
Very cool. And then where did you study abroad?
So I studied in Japan at a university called Keio Gijuku Daigaku. And so I went to Japanese language school for a year, so I did a full year abroad, and it was a fantastic experience. Lots of firsts. I found my first apartment while I was there, and a language that I barely spoke, and it was an experience, but it really was one of growth. And so when I have some trials and tribulations, even to this day, I still think back to those times and think, you made it through that, so you can make it through anything.
Yeah, what drew you to wanting to study abroad in Japan?
So I was a linguistics major in my undergrad, and part of my degree, I got a semester towards my degree. I got credit if I studied what's called a non-Indo-European language, which means a language that is not in any way related to the language family of which English is a part. German, French, even Hindi, and those sorts of languages are also all
Oh, wow. I didn't know that, yeah.
Yeah, and so they're all related if you go back far enough. So I got credit towards my degree if I studied a non-Indo-European language, so I could have either chosen Chinese or Japanese. And growing up, I was kind of a nerd, and so I liked, video games and those kinds of things. And so that's sort of, the pop culture side. But then on the more traditional culture side, which is actually what I'm more interested in now, is the traditional side of things. When I was growing up, I had a very close family friend who was from Japan, and so she would, talk about where she was from and some of the more cultural aspects of that. And so lots of connections growing up, I think, to the Japanese world. And then there was the academic side of things that had also benefited me on the academic side. And then I decided I did one semester, and I was like, might as well do 2 semesters. I was studying German and French at the same time. But I had been to Germany and had been to France, and I technically had been to Japan too, but it was only for a week. So I decided I want to go back and actually learn the language, because I remember when I was there before, it was just kind of a lot of writing that I did not understand. It looked very complicated, and I wanted to actually, be able to parse through it and figure out what it meant. So for me, it was very much language focused. But yeah.
So how did you start the process of applying to that? I mean, I know it was a little bit ago, but just applying to that program and that type of thing.
So for me, I knew that I wanted to go abroad and study abroad during my undergraduate at some point. I wasn't sure where that was going to be. Like I said, I was deciding between France, Germany, or Japan. And so I went to the office at William & Mary, which is called the Reeves Center. And so they handle study abroad, international affairs, those kinds of things, really anything with international scholar services. And so when I was transferring in, I kind of took a look at their website, which is always a great resource. And I, kind of got an idea of where, some of the processes, some of the timelines, the deadlines, because, with international things, you always have to pay attention to the deadlines
Mhm.
because they can be very concrete. And
Yeah.
so I kind of, did my research, and then I showed up one day and I said, I want to talk about going abroad. They gave me the whole spiel, you're a transfer student, it might extend your education a little bit, but for me, it was just something I'd always wanted to do. So
Mhm.
I started with that. Then I did my research, and I was fortunate enough in my experience that I actually did get a scholarship from the Japanese government to go study,
Wow.
which really helped me to fund the experience. So I come from what I take from that experience to this work here is that the importance of opening access to students, because I was one of those that without financial assistance I would not have been able to go.
Mhm. So, how soon would you recommend students plan their study abroad?
I think as soon as possible. When you have the inkling that you want to do it, you come talk to our office. There's nothing that's you're going to be locked into. Just having a conversation about what you'd like to do, and the reason that that's so important to start as early as possible is because of that financial piece. There are scholarships, and these scholarships, especially the more competitive national ones, Gilman, Fund for Education Abroad, Foreign, if that's applicable to you, those scholarships do have hard deadlines. And so if you do not get those deadlines, they're not very forgiving. And so it's important for students to be able to come in and in order to apply, you have to have already chosen a program.
Mhm.
So you kind of have to start the choosing process before you can get to the financial process. But the earlier you start, the better.
Mhm.
Even if you're a freshman and you'd like to study abroad, you can start looking at your options going into your sophomore year, even looking towards 2 years and going into your junior year. The CNU programs do change occasionally. There are some that are consistently offered, but there are always going to be programs to France if you want to go to France. There are always going to be programs to Japan if you want to go to Japan. And so, starting as early as possible and kind of locking in what you want to study and where you want to study it, I think it's for the best because it opens up as many options and as many avenues to financial help or scholarships that you can possibly get.
Yeah, I definitely recommend as well studying abroad and planning your trip out as soon as possible. Like I got an email in my communication department, and I was like the first person to apply as soon as possible because I was like worried about the competition. So,
Yeah.
but that's another aspect that I wish that I had like looked more into is the scholarship because there are lots of scholarship opportunities to apply to.
And I think that just in a very practical, real example you brought up, programs do fill. And so I think that the earlier that you can apply for it and make sure to get your name in the hat is for the better.
Mhm.
Not only for those that are planning the trips, wink, wink, but those that to help ease some anxieties if you actually have locked into an opportunity that you're
Mhm.
that you're going to be excited about and want to engage in.
Yeah, and then I got to look forward for a whole year to like my study
Yeah.
abroad. So like I know what I'm doing this summer, so that was a fun experience for sure.
And on the academic side, right, you can let your
Mhm.
academic advisor know this is what I'm planning on doing, this is the opportunity I'm looking at, and you can plan your schedule accordingly. Because
Mhm.
there's nothing worse than you finding the perfect opportunity and finding out you've already taken the course that's going to
Mhm.
satisfy.
Yeah, for me, it really helped me get ahead on my degree because
Great.
I took two elective classes where I was able to save those two electives that I like needed and not take those, and then end up double taking classes that I didn't need. So it was a good way to plan for sure.
Yeah, and I would say any major can study abroad with enough planning. When I was a little older than you, so when I was going through the process, computer science and business and those types of opportunities weren't as abundant as they are now.
Mhm.
And there are certainly more popular majors and topics when you're studying abroad. But whatever you want to study, you can do it abroad, and in some instances, you can do it better abroad. If you're really interested in manufacturing, it's wonderful to go and look at the American style of manufacturing, what we do here, but you cannot tell yourself that there are not certain pieces of the manufacturing process that are done better in other places, and you can go and learn from those and bring that back to the work that you do here too.
Yeah, for sure. That was definitely a piece that I've never even thought about. Because yes, there are a lot of people that like want to go abroad to learn a language, but there's also so many other reasons how not only experimental learning
Mm-hmm.
and
Sure.
but also things like that. Like it's a different perspective and different way of learning things that are not just in our own culture.
And I think we're living in a world that's becoming more and more globalized, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how that process plays out here locally is through internationalization. So you're coming across more and more people from other countries, not only that physically come to the United States, so like understanding those cross-cultural communication skills, language, even if you don't speak the language, understanding how to communicate with an individual that you might not have that linguistic connection with. But I think that those processes themselves and just the diffusion of knowledge, just generally speaking, because there are scholars across the world that are working, at the top of their careers and in the top of their fields. And so if you want to have access to premier knowledge, the most up-to-date knowledge, you have to have an understanding of what the international realm looks like and how that work's being done in that realm.
Yeah, definitely. What are some commonly asked questions by students?
So I think oftentimes, especially in the work that I do, it does come down to a lot of financial aspects of the study abroad opportunities, payment schedules, financing it, and then I work a lot with, because of that, students also come in with financial aid questions, even very basic, student account questions. That if you're not, working in that area, it can be very difficult to understand, which I fully understand. And so I think when they come into the office and they have questions, as pertaining to finances and scholarships, I am so happy to be able to help them. But even when they come in with questions about financial aid and student accounts, we also have a great relationship with individuals across campus. And so I might not be able to personally answer those questions, but I can put people into contact with individuals that can, and kind of, give sometimes the people the little push that they need to actually go and take a meeting. We have this wonderful area on the first floor of Christopher Newport Hall that you can go literally just show up and go in and talk to somebody. And I think that it's really an underutilized resource. And so I can't tell you how many students have gone in and been like, wow, they answered literally every question that I had. I didn't even know that was there. I'm like, yeah, it's a pretty good resource to the people that work at this office.
For sure. Yeah, I can see how it's easy to procrastinate wanting to do that
Sure.
as a student myself. But
you're busy.
but there's so many resources that you can answer some of those financial questions. But at the end of the day, it's also like about tuition sometimes, and you have to go to that office as well.
Yeah, and we do take data security very seriously. Not only is, of course, there's FERPA, everybody knows that. I think now, at least by the time they're sophomore or junior, they've learned that term. And so we don't want to we don't run in violation of law, but just generally speaking, we also really value the individual and their privacy. And so I think that those barriers exist for a reason and for good reasons. But I want students to know that even if I can't answer the question for those reasons, I'm happy to put you into contact with people that can. But in terms of specific questions, I think that it's often very scholarship focused. I think that if anybody's ever done a search for scholarships, especially for study abroad, you end up on one of these databases that will show up, 500, 600, 700 scholarships available. And you get very excited and you kind of go through it. And unfortunately, a lot of those scholarships are looking for your data, or they're looking for, they're advertising to you in some capacity. Some of them are legitimate, but I just did a very thorough search, and I went through about 500 different scholarships, and I found about 12 of those 500 that were actually legitimate opportunities for students to apply to. So as I find them, I do keep a list. There are very specific programmatic scholarships too, for example, one for the Japanese government, those kinds of things, but they have very specific programmatic requirements. These are more general. But I think that that's, again, right, going back to the earlier that you can find the opportunity that you want to go to. If you decided you want to study abroad in Denmark, then you can start looking for scholarships for people that do want to study in Denmark, and I have seen those.
Yeah.
But I think that's what it oftentimes comes back to, that financial piece, especially in the role that I have. We have a wonderful staff and wonderful faculty that work in this area too and answer a lot of questions. And so the more academic and programmatic side of things is there are other people that are much more thoroughly versed in those areas that work in the office, that work across campus, i.e. the faculty that are leading the program. So those are always good people to talk to. But I think on the academic side of things, come on in, and if I can't answer your questions, I'm happy to direct you to somebody that can.
How do you help students find the best program for them?
So I think a lot of times students come into the office and they decide where they want to study abroad first, which I think is a fine way to go about it. If you're really passionate about, France, or you're really passionate about Germany, fantastic. Anything to really get you involved and feel vested into the experience, I think is a great way to go. But I also think that a lot of times students forget what they want to study, which can be equally as important. And so I think really kind of parsing that, finding out the distillation of what the student wants to study can really be helpful to assist that student in finding the best match of a study abroad. If you want to study, Spanish, for example, a lot of students get really, I'm just using a language because that's where I come from. But if you want to study Spanish, for example, a lot of students want to go to Spain. It's Europe. They think of, Barcelona or Madrid, Ibiza in some instances. And so they think about that and get really excited. And so, but I think that, coming from the financial side of things, if finances are maybe a barrier for you, there are other places that they do speak Spanish that are wonderful locations that have beautiful scenery, beautiful cultures, historic, and you can accomplish something similar in those areas. And so I think that that's when you can really distill down the reason, and you can do some of this work on your own too, right? Of why am I studying abroad? What do I actually want to get out of this opportunity? I think that could be really helpful for you to find the best fit.
Awesome. If you could give students one tip to study abroad, what would it be?
I think, of course, starting early, I think is a good one. Make sure that you have, allowed yourself enough time just for your own anxieties, to find the opportunity that fits best for you. And then I do really think it comes back to that, figure out why you want to study abroad. Do you want to go abroad because your roommate's going abroad? It's a great reason. I mean, if you want to go abroad because your roommate's going abroad, you want to have that experience. I think that's fantastic. But it's also okay to be different. It's okay to, if your why is that you're really interested in this specific tech that's only being utilized in Singapore, that's great. That's the reason being, and I guess maybe the more overarching tip would be find what you're passionate about, find what's going to keep you engaged, because the whole point of going on a study abroad opportunity is to derive benefit out of it, and it can be an absolutely life-changing experience. And for most students, it is. But I think that the students that may find themselves not having the best of experiences, it can really come from the fact that they don't feel a connection to the program or to the opportunity that they've chosen to engage in. And so you can kind of, forego that, and you can kind of get ahead of that by really taking some time, while you're in the shower, while you're eating dinner, while you're walking, your dog or whatever. Just be thinking about, why am I actually going on this opportunity, and what do I hope to get out of it, and set those goals.
Awesome. And then to kind of wrap up, what would you say is the coolest part of your job at the study abroad office?
Yeah, so for me, I think that it is helping students, in some instances, accomplish a lifelong dream of going abroad. We work with a lot of students who have never been abroad, and we work with students who never even saw themselves going abroad, and being able to help them, to go through and find scholarships that might be able to assist them in some instances, or to find out that this is a more accessible opportunity than they even thought it was, and to accomplish that. And then I think that that's more the overarching kind of best part of my job. And then as like a side part of my job, I really like the actual planning of the opportunities. The faculty are the ones that develop the coursework and develop the actual agendas and that sort of thing. But then we could be the ones that kind of play the travel agent part, that look at, okay, where would be a good place to stay? How would be a good place? What would be a good place to get the tickets for this and that? And so that's a really, on the practical side of things, I think that that's a really, really cool thing to be able to do too, the fun part.
Yeah, for sure. It's like you're getting to be a travel agent, but you're also making a fulfilling impact on a lot of students' lives.
Yeah, I think that, and what better thing is there than people expanding their knowledge base and engaging in a scholarship that they find interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's where I really get meaning out of the work that I do. But then, the other stuff makes me smile too.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, David, for coming on Boarding
Yeah.
All Captains.
Thank you for having me. It was wonderful.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.